Yeah.
Now I know everyone has been asking me to do a zombie sins on today's movie, but with the 15th anniversary of the release of Shaun of the Dead happening this year, and it being my favorite piece of cinema ever, well, I wanted to take a different route with today's analytical video. While zombie movies are very widespread and have their own variations on the genre itself, a comedic approach has been attempted many times with varying levels of possibly intended cheesiness versus grounded hilarity, but rarely do any of these stick out as a legitimate comedy that has mass appeal that every moviegoer, regardless of age or background, can enjoy. Amongst the varied attempts to merge the zombies with comedy, there are two relative kings of the zombie comedy subgenre, one king reigning in the good old America and the other in the cheery old United Kingdom, and both serve comedic elements to the zombie genre in their own special ways. And today, we are looking into the aspects of the first film of the Cornetto trilogy that became a cult classic and a zombie film fan favorite for what has now been exactly 15 years and counting. Today, we are looking into why Shaun of the Dead is the perfect zombie movie.
What's he do? Just say base. Or freeze. What a tip.
As we lurch and stagger forward, there will be spoilers for the film, so if you've never seen the film,
Fuck off.
and this will be really analytical, so I may be digging into hidden meanings that probably aren't there, but interpretation in art is up to each viewer's interpretation. 2004's Shaun of the Dead was the first of creator Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy. It brilliantly blended elements of both horror and comedy genres without stepping on the toes of either. The horror and comedy act as parallels, always creatively working and intertwining in the right moments, using recurring background characters, copious amounts of references,
We're coming to get you, Barbara!
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
reutilizing scenes and dialogue cleverly,
Big Al also says dogs can't look up.
Yeah, well, Big Al also says dogs can't look up.
They can't. Oh, can't they?
No, they can't. Of course they can.
But dogs can look up.
just making it all feel natural and have a great flow to develop a strong piece of cinema. Most importantly, it's the fact that it's a zombie movie in both senses. We have to remember that there are two very different definitions of the word zombie. The more popularly known flesh-eating resurrected corpse, and then the original definition of a mindless drone doing remedial tasks and not much else. Shaun of the Dead gracefully pivots between these parallel definitions. Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead manages to perfectly encapsulate the original idea and meaning behind George A. Romero's zombie films.
What basic skills remain are more remembered behaviors from normal life.
Not just depicting flesh-eating reanimated corpses, but also how everyday people metaphorically lead mundane and repetitive drone-like lives as zombies repeating themselves ad nauseum. Romero's Dawn of the Dead perceptively presented the idea that zombies would venture to the mall or carry certain objects to replicate the lives they once knew, a subtle jab at modern society that flew over the heads of many audience goers throughout the years. While Shaun of the Dead takes that concept and blows it out of proportion in a very well-designed way that only a comedic approach could take. The opening intro showing people before becoming zombies, kicking balls around, asking for change on the street, pushing grocery carts, cashiers working their tables, commuters waiting for the bus and all pulling out their cellular devices simultaneously, and last but not least, the title card with the citizens walking down the streets looking like freshly risen corpses. As Shaun himself puts it,
You're dead.
even the media that the public consumes is saturated with these mirrored scenes, as Shaun mindlessly flips through the channels. The real-world events present a message that's obvious to the film's audience, but hidden to the character. Whether it's a channel of drama, news, or game shows, the incorporation of these symbols creates a realistic but hysterical take on modern society at large.
Calling it Judgment Day. There's
Panic on the streets of London.
serious attacks on people who are literally being eaten alive.
Throughout the film's beginning, the details of the zombie outbreak are presented gradually and with subtlety at first, tucked away in the newspaper on the counter or hidden in news broadcasts that are going on in the background that can interrupt their television watching, and then accelerating, becoming more intrusive and prominent, such as the arrival of military trucks, interrupting conversations.
Are you living around here?
Yeah, you?
Yeah, I just bought a place, actually. I know, a bit grown up, eh?
And people acting increasingly peculiar and strange. This is exemplified perfectly by the two mirrored scenes of Shaun waking up and going to the local convenience store and getting a pop and red cornetto ice cream cone, where people in the streets are set up in their daily routines as presented earlier, like shrugging off the homeless man, paying no mind to the joggers zooming by, and just paying no mind to any of the number of people that are populating the background of his life. The hints of impending doom are sprinkled everywhere for the audience to snack on. The hints are riddled throughout the beginning, with grayed out pasty-faced commuters, the elderly dozing off, and most citizens just running on autopilot. For Shaun and the audience, it's hard to bridge the gap between the healthy and the infected, as they all seem to be zombies of one kind or another. Even when the zombies are taking over the streets of London, Ed and Shaun ignore their demeanor and actions. For example, we see a girl making out with her boyfriend earlier on, but when we see them again, she is halfway through his neck eating right through that, and Shaun and Ed pay no mind. Or that the White Line song they were singing was given backup vocals by a friendly passerby zombie. A lighthearted romp with the zombies shining comedic light on how we ignore people we see in our lives that are just passing by. Hell, we even see Shaun entering the living room in a zombie-like walk, yawn in a zombie-like groan, and even slovenly march towards his video game before even considering
You got work.
Shaun himself is a middle-class zombie, staggering and lurching through his own life. Liz starts out the movie trying to coax Shaun from breaking his mundane and zombie-like behavior of droning to the Winchester, getting smashed, and coming back home. She wants him to live a little.
It's your anniversary soon, isn't it?
It was last week.
Oh, did you do anything special? We came here.
As Henry David Thoreau once said, most men lead lives of quiet desperation. Now, this isn't the quote you would apply to in a zombie film, usually, but it's actually on point. Shaun leads a small life, and it's the very definition of emotional and financial stagnation. He's not going anywhere, and all of the significant people in his life have an opinion about that. Shaun is an everyday man we can relate to, and he exists in a conflicted state with his zombie-like persona, pulled in 3 different directions. His girlfriend wants to see him awake from the dead, to try new things, to break the monotony, to live a little. His roommate Pete in the mirror, a reflection of the successful businessman and adult he wants to become, looming over his shoulder. Pete tries to get him to completely sever ties with Ed, his slothful, childish, and do-nothing childhood friend, with Ed being the force that keeps Shaun in his zombie-like, repetitive, going-nowhere lifestyle, never taking anything seriously, all while not taking charge of his own life. Most characters will drive home the fact that Shaun is this living zombie, mindlessly moving any direction except forward. Even his 17-year-old coworker talks about this.
Look, I know you don't want to be here forever. You know, I got things I want to do in my life.
When?
After this, Shaun's stepfather stealthily slips into his workplace, demanding he shows up to his mother's with flowers for their bi-monthly visit, prompting him to reiterate how he is not in control of his life. Shaun basically ignores Liz during their phone call to prove to a 17-year-old that he is in control of his actions, which he is not. His date night plans with Liz are never made because he calls a little bit too late, and his failure to recognize his own faults, he suggests the Winchester to Liz for the upteenth time. The prospect of a dead-end, repetitious lifestyle eventually causes Liz to boot Shaun out the door and breaks up with him once and for all. So Shaun has yet another night of the same old drinking with Ed at the Winchester, the very place Liz scolded him for. Now he's drowning out his sorrows there again, which leads into a key element of the film, its use of diegetic sound. Where the use of musical scores is natural and a part of the scene in a movie, where the song If You Leave Me Now starts playing, dragging the dagger deeper into Shaun's heart with the recurring joke,
Yeah, I'll put this on random.
The music of the film also has a synth-heavy soundtrack, reminiscent of the original Dawn of the Dead, and even opens with the original score, on top of popular songs, as stated earlier with When You Leave Me Now, or when Shaun, Ed, and the random zombie do a rather rudimentary a cappella version of Grandmaster Flash's White Lines, but most prominently the fight choreography to Queen's Don't Stop Me Now.
Tonight, I'm gonna have myself Who the hell put this on? Some random.
as described by Simon Pegg, was a juxtapose of a rather cheerful and uplifting tone amidst the rising chaos of the zombie bar fight, making each hit in sync with the rhythm of the drum beat and having certain frames work perfectly with the lyrics. Now back to the original story at hand, Ed starts to lay out stories about the usual denizens of the ragtag bar, explaining their lives and giving them more character to what is basically background characters that will never speak more than one line. It's in the Winchester where it's established that no character, even small background character, is wasted. Every human you see in just about every scene is a zombie you'll see later in the film. While another treat for repeat viewers, it was also dictating that they were all zombies all along. No scene or dialogue goes without purpose, always being circled back to at some point either drastically later or soon after.
What, because he can impersonate an orangutan? Fuck a doodle do.
Ed here. It's no wonder I always bring my flatmates out, and then that only exacerbates things.
What do you mean?
If we don't, they'll come up here and they'll tear us to pieces. And that is really going to exacerbate things for all of us. Don't point that gun at Barbara!
Ed, don't exacerbate things!
What does that mean?
But regardless, every element of this movie serves a purpose towards the plot, their characters, and their development. To cheer up his friend, Ed attempts to make plans with Shaun for the next day, leading to the idea of foreshadowing, which the next day when the zombie outbreak occurs, Ed's plans actually come to fruition, as Edgar Wright dictates and explains.
Know what we should do tomorrow? We'll have a Bloody Mary first thing. Have a bite at the King's Head, couple at the Little Princess, stagger back in. Back at the bar for Shaun.
Foreshadowing is also prevalent in the film, dictating for what's to come.
You want to live like an animal? Go live in a shed, you thick fuck! The front door is open again!
Secure with all doors and windows firmly locked and barricaded. Police and story.
Next time I see him, he's dead.
So much premonition crammed into these short scenes that does have payoff. Pete also slams Shaun for defending Ed and how much Shaun is held back by him telling him to sort your fucking life out, prompting Shaun to finally get his life in order by drunkenly writing out his plans on the fridge dry erase board as his mom's recorded message, ironically and foreshadowingly, is that a word?
Because these days lots of people don't eat meat.
Which plays well with the zombie motif. Even small phrases like "ain't that a slice of fried gold" or "dogs can look up" will always make a return in something called callback humor in order to take on a new meaning for the characters and their development. In the beginning, Ed tells Shaun he's sorry after the events that happened, but honestly, it was just so he could take in the nasty, silent but deadly fart. This shows that they are still good friends at a childish but brother-like level. Near the end, after Ed is bitten and Shaun is having to say goodbye to not only his best friend, but the part of him that he was struggling to let go of, Ed tells Shaun he is sorry, making the audience and Shaun assume that he is sorry for his behavior from earlier about not taking the situation seriously. But in fact, he was letting another stinky-ass fart rip. But the essence of the apology has a whole new meaning. The next time we see Ed, he is still around, but as a zombie still dronefully playing his games with Shaun. We'll get back to them a little bit later on in this video. We explained how the contrast of Shaun's normal morning routine makes him unaware to the zombie-like routine he has made for his life. And when he comes face to face with a zombie for the first time, well, let's just say what transpires is more comical in the sense that they think she is just a drunkard. But the most entertaining and, well, realistic part of Shaun's experience with the dead is the fact that he runs inside to watch television instead of tackling it head on, although he does throw a few records and beat their brains in. But when it literally comes to the front door on him, he panics and frantically uses whatever he can to fight back. Most, if not all, zombie movies feature a central character that's a battle-hardened stud, eager to kick some zombie ass. Even Zombieland has the badass characters portrayed by Emma Stone and Woody Harrelson. But in Shaun of the Dead, everyone is average, or even below average, realistically emphasized by break cuts of normal everyday actions like getting ready for work. The everyday man versus the everyday zombie. It would not be consistent to have an action hero emerge and save the day in this small-scale romantic comedy about people whose lives resemble a hamster endlessly running in a wheel in a cage. It's far more exciting and interesting to see ordinary people fighting for their lives against a zombie horde, forced by circumstances to become more resourceful, strong, and cunning than they've ever had to be in their entire lives. They are us in a sense, and we want to cheer them on and overcome the zombie horde of monotony and, of course, the zombies themselves. The literal zombies of the film are generic as they come: slow, shambling, rotting, reanimated corpses attracted to light and noise, and who can only be killed
by removing the head or destroying the brain.
And of course, eating the flesh of the living, where their bites can infect people and eventually kill them to add to the zombie count. The zombies themselves give our cast the horror-typical challenge of survival. Other brilliant moments in the movie that work with this zombie trope that amplify the comedy are like scenes when Shaun, a typical guy, attempts to flail the backyard zombie with a tennis ball.
No, that's rubbish.
Or when the group decides to take acting advice from Diane to pretend to be zombies, taking into account the exact mannerisms and body language of the stereotypical zombie.
Barbara, that's excellent. Sorry, dear, I was miles away.
Ironically, Shaun and Liz are the only ones that are able to take on the zombie role perfectly.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay.
And this whole thing of acting like zombies actually works, something no other zombie franchise had tried doing up until that point, poking fun at how easy it may have been to survive. And keep in mind, this was before The Walking Dead decided to give them a sense of smell for living flesh. And of course, in the good nature of zombie films comes the brutality of gore and clean headshots.
I shot.
But beyond that, Shaun constantly must break his barriers by becoming the de facto leader of his group of survivors, rallying them together and melding their personalities to try to find a safe haven. But while corralling them, have personal issues that make you almost forget that there are cannibalistic demons walking around. From a casual conversation of Philip giving away Shaun's toys, to the group having a casual drinking session after barricading the Winchester. Liz serves as a co-leader of sorts, bringing peace to the otherwise stressful situations, with her friends David and Diane serving as sources of doubt and forgiveness respectively when it comes to her views on Shaun. We even see how the female version of Shaun, Yvonne, is also attempting to overcome the undead with a mirrored reflection of the groups they are both leading, emphasizing how maybe all of us have these bonds and challenges we all face internally. But it's when a majority of these characters succumb to the zombie hordes that revelations occur. Shaun and company face much turmoil in terms of death, the first being his stepfather, which we see how he talks down to Shaun as if he is still a child for the time he is around, even still having the child locks on his car. When Shaun figures out Phil has been bitten, he puts off his imminent demise and is even pretending to be okay with killing him, but he also refuses to call him his father. Shaun eventually has a heart-to-heart with Philip before succumbing to his infection, giving Shaun understanding towards his stepfather's seemingly harsh parenting to see him raised right, giving Shaun some understanding as he grows older towards his stepfather's seemingly harsh parenting. All Philip wanted to do was see Shaun raised right. Now, his mother being totally oblivious to everything that is going on, whether it be her friends, husband, or hordes of the undead, it's reflective of how most mothers will be towards how their children are going through life, blissfully ignoring everything that's going wrong while still trying to do her motherly duties, enough to the point where she keeps her bite wound hidden from her son in the group so they won't worry. Barbara's death kicks off the most violent and stressful part of the movie, which is a big trigger for Shaun's transformation, with Shaun himself having to kill zombie Barbara to embody how even our parents must eventually pass on, no matter how much we want to keep them close, and how we eventually will have to move on.
What are you doing? We have to deal with her?
David and Diane, the two sides of the coin in Liz's views towards Shaun, with David being the one that doubted everything about Shaun's attitudes, with David dying right after their confrontation to rip apart the ideas of keeping secrets and holding resentment. And then Diane dying shortly after when she desperately but idiotically tries to save David even though she saw him ripped apart, showing how holding on to these grudges can be deadly. Shaun, seeing Pete turned and initially ignoring him, not being able to see his purely work ethic side becoming zombified, would eventually come back to bite him, or in the movie's case, someone else, eventually leading to Pete biting Ed. Shaun's work ethic directly attacking his sloven and childish side, embodied in Pete and Ed's past constant verbal battles. With Shaun cherishing his brother and a slipping part of him, Shaun angrily kills Pete in the process, completely getting rid of that part of him. Throughout the movie, Ed is telling Shaun to chill out, not taking any situation seriously, being the main reason their safe haven is found out over wanting to play pinball of all things. Even at the end, Ed admits to only holding Shaun back. Interestingly enough though, while most nameable zombies in the movie are put down or are forgotten, Ed was neither killed or forgotten, remaining as a zombie that Shaun keeps chained out of public eyes in his backyard shed, possibly symbolizing how Shaun can never really overcome the elements of Ed that were a part of him, as we did see that as a unit they were still a functional pair, translating their hours of cooperative video game use to a real-world zombie gallery, or even being borderline homosexual.
Well, I wasn't the one who was blowing our cover by having a tiff with my boyfriend.
He's not my boyfriend.
Might be a bit warm, the cooler's off. Thanks, babe.
Showing that it's still okay that we are still a bit lazy, childish, and to spend time with our friends, even if it somewhat makes us the zombies we try to refrain from being. By the movie's ending, we can see Shaun's transformation into a more reliable individual who can hold his own, but also support others, and somewhat be the action hero type.
As Bertrand Russell once said, the only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation. I think we can all appreciate the relevance of that now.
Although his words of wisdom may come from the bottom of a glass of Guinness. He, however, blames himself for everyone's deaths, almost resorting to suicide to avoid him and Liz becoming zombies themselves once the horde is honing in on them. The universe, however, threw them a bone, or two, after all was dead and done, giving them a chance, more so, a final goodbye for Shaun in his old life as he rose above it all to find a new purpose. But once the military rolls in realistically and mows down all the zombies, everything starts to calm down. And we discover that no matter how hard we try or how much we change, as Shaun lumbers forth, as he did at the start, to watch zombies adorn the television screen, the zombie-like state of the general public and even ourselves will remain and become just a staple in modern life. We will always be the zombies that we try to avoid being. So we may as well just have a nice cold pint
and wait for all this to blow over.